Welcome to the Cold Email Community Podcast, where we're interviewing industry experts on their best cold email strategies and bringing them straight to you. I'm Richard Francis, co-founder at Coldlytics, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. You're about to hear an interview with Youssef, CEO and founder at the Scale Lab. After helping others raise more than $1 billion, he's created an agency that applies exactly what works to help companies grow their business. Let's get started.
Tell us a little bit about who you are, kind of what you've done in the past, how you made the Forbes 30 under 30 list. Would love to hear that story.
Yeah, sure. Happy to say that. So, originally I'm half Moroccan, half Austrian, born and raised in Casablanca, Morocco. I would say been wearing multiple hats. Started my career mostly with tech companies such as AWS and Google. This is where I really found out that, okay, I wanted to be more involved in tech. Got quite interested in, I would say, growing companies in general while I was there. Then very quickly switched to a company called the Web Summit, where I was working with the investors relations team. This is where we were helping startups to raise funds. And we did that across US, Europe, Asia as well. With the team, we collectively supported startups to raise up to 1 billion US collectively. And let's say through some of that work, through some of other work that I was doing on the side, helping startups raise funds specifically and grow. This is what got me through to the Forbes 30 under 30 list in Asia specifically. So that was the first time my parents were finally proud about what I was doing. Some level of social recognition. But I would say all in all, what I'm doing now, I'm the founder and CEO of a company called the Scale Lab. We're a B2B lead generation software and services company. So we help essentially sales teams to be fueled with warm leads. And we do that continuously so that they don't have to focus on finding the prospects and engaging with them. The only thing they need to take care of is talking to the leads that come in and actually making the sale. It really came from a problem that we saw quite a lot. Companies have sales teams, account managers, and so on, but they spend half of their time searching for companies and also try and find ways to engage with them. The problem is that some of the engagements that they create were, I would say, odd or wrong sometimes, so they would miss their first shots. And a lot of the times when you do cold outreaches, be it through email, phone, in person, whatever that is, it deals a lot with what first impression you make. And that was a super important point. So one part was finding the prospects, so the data level of it and identifying them and so on, and then finding ways to engage with them that would really trigger their interest and make a connection really positive for long-term sale then.
Love it.
That was kind of where we got.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's really cool that you have this background in VC, because that experience is so directly correlated with having a hypothesis in a company and making sure it actually succeeds and saying, hey, this is what we think is going to happen, but we're actually putting our money on that. We're betting our chips here and saying, hey, we really think that's what's going to happen. And we're going to be paying for it if we find out wrong. So it's pretty cool that you've come from that background that's so high stakes by comparison, or maybe equally high stakes actually being on the other side of the table. And now as a business owner, a founder, you're saying, hey, I know what scales. I've seen it scale. We've invested in things that scaled up to $1 billion in investments. Now I'm going to take this expertise and apply it to my own business. And I think that's so cool. I love that.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I can add up on that part is what I find also very interesting in this is, of course, VC money is good whenever you want to accelerate a growth, because if you do it on your own funds, I mean, I would advise if you don't have to raise to not raise. Of course, it's a lot better, I would say, in some ways. But VC money comes in really a good place when you need to accelerate that growth. Hire people, develop a product, and so on, and you can't do it on your own funds. But the thing is, like, whenever you get that money in, you will grow, of course, but growing as a team means also that you need to grow your sales. And that part of the sales was a part that I thought was kind of missing a lot of times. Like, what do you do with all of this money? How do you engage more customers? And this is where the Scale Lab, so the company I run now, also comes in, really in that specific part of, okay, you raise, you want to grow more, we can actually help you do that in a very efficient way.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, well, let's jump in and hear a little bit about scaling through cold email. So one of the things that you've mentioned to me on our last call was the significance of that first email, and you've kind of alluded to it already, versus the follow-ups. Why don't we start there? Tell us about the significance of the first email and how you view it at the Scale Lab and what you do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're totally right. And maybe to give some references, I mean, last year we've been able to generate over 2,000 leads, and that was through email specifically. We have another subset that does it with LinkedIn, and also a combination of email and LinkedIn. But the reason why I mentioned this is it's very competitive to use emails. Actually, it's a very competitive market. There's a few studies that show that an individual receives about 121 emails a day. So if you send an email among most likely a lot of other cold emails to a prospect, then you're actually competing directly with others, and you might even be competing with existing solutions that they have. So the level of attention and interest that you start off from is extremely low. And the difference also with email, compared to, I would say, an in-person meeting or a call, is that the person has the option to also not to reply. Of course, you cannot pick up a phone if you want, but the email can lay there forever. It's just gonna be dumped at some point, and be in the void of those unread messages that just being clicked, unread, or trashed in the spam. So the whole goal is, how do you stand out, and how, whenever you get in touch with someone, you make a good impression, so that not only the email is open, but you actually trigger a reply. And that's really a key factor, because no matter what you do, that first step has to be really thought about, because this is what's going to generate your results ultimately.
Yeah, love it. So I know that you're going to provide a template here for our listeners. Yes. I'm excited to share that with everybody. But tell us a little bit about what step one in that template looks like and how it correlates.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's a few things. So on the email template that we developed, and anyone listening here can access it. We'll publish it on our website as well. And it's really something that we've built over time of trialing multiple types of emails, and it's really a combination or aggregation of the best tips that we got. So in that template sheet, there's actually two things that you'd get. First is a series of 4 subject lines, some of which we saw work really well, just to get someone's attention, and then a template email that you can use to personalize your approach with someone. Let me start first maybe with the subject line, because we want to give to anyone listening also to the podcast some very actionable tips here. The first thing that anyone sees on their either phone or desktop, whichever device they use, is the subject line. So thinking that through and personalizing it, we find typically that personalizing it with a prospect's name and even asking a question within that first email does trigger really good open rates. Something like meet next week, chat next week, ? Or chat next week, Matt, for example, with your first name, does trigger someone's attention, because it's just very much linked to them. Something that I want to give into the background here of writing emails is kind of the old world of writing emails and the new world of writing emails. The old world is very much focused on sending something to someone that is a pitch, that is really focused on me. It's really, we see that a lot. I mean, we all receive these emails of, hi, my name is this, I do this, my company does that, and we can help your company achieve this. Are you interested? And that's the standard, I'd say, call to action. The problem with this is that if you send an email like this, most likely there's hundreds of other people who are sending the same email to the prospect. So you're actually not differentiating at all. You might have personalized your first name, good, but everyone else has as well. So there's no difference. You might have personalized your company name, super easy to do. Everybody does it as well. So there's still no difference. And you haven't spoken to the prospect. One maybe advice or one tip that I could give to people would be to check a very interesting persona that's called Josh Brown. You can take a look at him on LinkedIn. Has really good content about cold approaches, can be phone or email. Something he speaks about is really about, he calls it the concept of depositing. So you deposit value to someone before you can actually withdraw it. But the concept is very simple, is you need to give before you can get something. The reason why I say this is when you approach someone, this is the new way now of engaging over email. your email has to be extremely personalized and not talk too much about yourself, but talk a lot about the prospect, because you want to differentiate, you want to actually stand out from the crowd by making sure that you have an icebreaker that is very specific to that person, maybe even something that can add value to their work or already at the first go. But your email needs to be read as if it was handwritten, as if you had taken a big level of homework before it's been sent. So the point again is to stand out, and it comes to a lot of work to do. So I've been saying this. Now the headline is one thing, and this has to be personalized, and then we come into the copy. Maybe before we speak about the copy, I can talk about one of the first steps of your lead generation, which is the data. I don't know how much you want to talk about data on here, because I think you're probably more of an expert than I am.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to summarize a little bit of our positioning on
Yeah.
it, and would love to hear yours too, because everybody kind of views
Sure.
data a little bit differently. But I think the longer you're in this game, the more emails you've sent, we all kind of move towards the same place, which is the better data you start with, the better your outcome is going to be. Excuse me. So I was chatting with somebody yesterday, and they said, "Hey, what's the difference between getting data in one source versus another?" And they were comparing our platform to somebody else. I said, at the end of the day, it's like ingredients that you cook with. If you're going to try and impress your guests with a meal, I wouldn't want to cook with ingredients from the dollar store. That's okay. You can get cheap data, you can get things that don't work very well, and you can get the outcomes, but your percentage is going to be so much lower than if you'd started with a qualified list of prospects that you actually had something of value to give to those people. You could blast 1 million people in the world, but if there are 1 million of the wrong people, it's such a shame. You could have talked to 10 of the right people and not pissed off 1 million people with your cold email and had a much better series of conversations and created less headaches. So really the quality over quantity really applies early in the process. And I would say it actually dwindles later on. It's more about volume later, but when you get started in this process, in my perspective, you should start with the best quality data that you can. It's putting the best race fuel in your car because you want to get the furthest, fastest. And at the end of the day, it's going to be about how many miles did you go? How many emails did you send? Did you do it consistently? And that's what's going to drive the long-term result. But if you start with nothing, then you're just going to end up with something very mediocre as a result. So really the data quality in the beginning is something I'm really passionate about, but would love to hear your take on data quality.
No, absolutely. And I actually really like the comparison with the spices, because I mean, we say a lot that the data is really the raw material by which you're going to build up your campaigns. And if you start with something that's really bad, then the rest of your campaign, no matter what you write, no matter how you personalize, imagine if you send an email to someone whose email address is actually wrong or outdated or anything. Well, what's the point in the end? Sometimes it's as simple as that, but the focus on your data from the start is critical. And I think a lot of the times, people who are not necessarily in the field underestimate this. So they only realize how important it is when you start and when you do your first campaigns and you realize, oh, actually, I spent so much time trying to find this list of 10, 100, 2000, whichever amount you want of emails. And I didn't focus on the quality of those lists. It's not only the quality of emails, and it's super important, but it's also the quality of the research that goes into who you're going to target, because you want to target the right personas. You want to make sure that you know exactly who you're specifically targeting, so that you can then get that as a very, very narrowed list. I think for us, it's probably the first key factor of success in this industry. And that's something we focus a lot on. We have our own systems, of course, internally that allows us, one, to define personas with our clients. We really predefine everything before we start anything. That's the first step that we take. And then once we have defined this, we go about searching these profiles and generating some level of data from them, anywhere from their first names, company names, titles, things that they've done in the past, maybe some level of activity, and then finding their emails, LinkedIn URLs, so all the social media URLs and so on, which is all information that we can then use into our email copy. And that's super important, because I will say something that might sound very banal, but if you only have someone's first name, then your level of personalization is limited to the first name. But the more you can get, the more you can personalize to. So that's super important. And a company like Coldlytics, I think, does that really, really well. by having, you know, that whole research aspect of it. And I mean, you're getting good spices for lead generators like us, so we're happy to cook the marketing then.
I appreciate that. What's your opinion on over personalization versus being more minimal? I've heard people do tests that said, hey, you know, they reached a point where we personalized to a point that it was just kind of too much. And I've heard other people say, hey, you know, that personalization, the more I personalized it, the better results I got. And my personal hypothesis was, hey, the first guy probably creeped him out. And the second guy was probably so human, they would have never known that it was a scaled email campaign. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question, especially since personalization would take also some level of time. So there's an investment in, there's a cost, of course, for it, because if you want to generate other types of information, then you'll have to gather it in some ways. Either you'll have to pay for it or you have to spend time in building it. So for example, in our approach, and you'll see the template that we've been talking about, it's a template actually that has helped us reach over 90% open rates and even over 60% reply rates, sometimes up to 80% reply rates. That's worked really well. It's an email opener, so it's the first email in the whole sequence. And that actually worked well because I think there was kind of the right amount of personalization. Things that are easy to get, first name, company name, titles, or industry, very simple. And then we use an icebreaker. I think everybody knows what an icebreaker is, but the point is, since we're doing a cold email, we want to break that first cold temperature by bringing something that is really specific to the prospect. So something that they have done. We typically research it even manually sometimes, and include that in the outreach. The point is really to be specific about them, something that they have achieved in the past, something that their company is offering, like their range of services and so on, just to make sure that we actually show the prospect we were also interested in them. The point of emailing, and that's, I think, something that's super important, that's really in our DNA. We're not sending cold emails to sell something. Nobody is selling on email. The email is meant to connect. It's meant to create a long-term relationship with the prospect. So we're really shifting from just mere selling over email, like, oh, hey, here's my pitch deck, would you like to buy, to actually building connections. The sale might happen after you've connected first, but you need to create that first step. So to get back to your answer of too much versus too little, I do think that too little actually won't help you stand out at all. And not even talking about the size of your email. It's really about what do you put in there. And too much might be too time consuming sometimes if you spend really a lot of time doing it. So it's a matter of results. I would say doing a balance of things that you can get very easily by providers like Coldlytics, for example, and other things that you have to do manually. For instance, the icebreaker or sending a personalized video to someone. This has really a result. Again, Matt, the point is about making the best first impression. So there needs to be some level of homework done to get that.
Yeah, excellent. I want to circle back to the template over the next 5 minutes. Let's walk through your template and hear start to finish what the steps are in that process. Walk us through it.
Yeah, of course. So in the template, simply what we have are subject lines that anyone can try. There are 4, so you can do different tests to see which one works best for you. And then on the email template itself, it's an opener. It's really the first email that somebody gets. What we focus on is, first step is talking about the prospect themselves. We never start with saying, I do this, I do that, because first of all, everybody else does it. But there's also a simple point, which is you have to think about how your email is pre-visualized. So basically the email blurb. When you open your phone, you get a notification. There's a few characters that you can already see, and they tell you whether or not you want to answer to that text message, or whether or not you want to answer to that email, or open it now or later. Same for the desktop. The average length of a email text blurb is anywhere between 40 to 130 characters, because it would change from the client, whether you use Outlook or Gmail, whether you use iPhone or Android, and so on. So make sure that in those first characters, you have things that relate immediately to the prospect. What we start with is saying that we're intrigued by the company. so that right away they see that we speak about them, and then we talk about their industry, actually, things that they do in the industry, so that they see right away that we speak about them and not necessarily about us. Then we make a connection between that first sentence talking about them and the industry, and saying that we actually also work with companies in that same industry to achieve a specific outcome. And that's something that every company has to define. Our outcome is to help companies generate more revenue, and that's something that we do. And then we actually just simply put some other custom variables. So the role of the person we're reaching out to, their location as well. So again, it's really focused about them. We drop again the company name just to make sure that the person knows that we are still talking about them. And we finish with an action title, which is about just catching up for a quick talk. The point and the tone of this email is to be human, to be 80% focused on the prospect, 20% on yourself, making sure it's about them, not about you. And it actually ends up making people feel comfortable. So I would try that. I mean, I advise anyone to try it. It has given really good results. As said, over 90% open rates with the subject lines and the blurb that you can have, and over a 60% reply rate, because again, it's really focused on the prospect.
Excellent. Yeah, love that. I think everything you said there is bang on. It aligns with every episode we've recorded to date. I think, I said this in the last episode, but it's really nice to hear these recurring things and writing an email that's about them and not about you, and really saying, hey, we're catching your attention early on with something that's of value to you. And with that, sometimes you still don't get them on that first email. So let's move to that second email in the sequence and kind of your methodology with follow-ups in this template.
Yeah, I think again, it's a good question about the follow-ups. This is an email opener, and it shouldn't be the last email of your sequence. A lot of the times, you're busy as well. And it does happen that you'd see an email, you forget to respond to it, even though you read it, or you put it as marked as unread, and you're not always in the head of your prospects. So just coming back nicely again is an important thing. I mean, we've seen that about 30 to 40% of the replies that we get come from the second, third, or fourth follow-up that we do. So missing out on that on a list of, I would say, 100 prospects, it's like almost half of it. So thinking about doing this, I would say we speak to a lot of people who have the issue of not being able to do it because they think they have to do it manually. So thinking about who you need to follow up with is really tedious process. But there's a lot of softwares now that allow you to do this. I mean, we're using a software called Lemlist. We're also their agency partner here in Asia. So of course, I would advise using them. They have a good level of personalization. But there's a lot more. There's the reply.io of this world, the outreach.io, and any other email client that allows you to build sequences, automate them, will just save you an enormous amount of time, plus bring you a lot of results. So it's highly advisable to use them.
Love it. Fantastic. Yeah. You mentioned you had a specific subject line that you like to use when things have gone quiet and it's a good prospect and you want to try and re-engage them. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I like this one. It's something that I'd say is a bit out of the box thinking, because as we said earlier on, the subject line is the first thing that the prospect sees. It's really important to emphasize on that one. Something that we tried and that works. I wouldn't say you should put it in a sequence. It's rather something to use as your last bullet. If a prospect that you want to engage with hasn't responded yet, or you've sent a proposal but you haven't heard back from the person after 2 weeks, even though they said they would come back, and so on. The subject line that we use, and we actually manually type it, is between brackets, no subject, and all small caps. And that's actually when you use Gmail. You can try a test for yourself. When you send an email to someone and you forgot to put up a subject line, this is what appears. Since everybody actually uses subject lines, writing an email with no subject line just stands out right away from the crowd of emails that anyone receives, and allows you to trigger a prospect's attention or someone's attention. And if you use the blurb right, anything that follows up to what you were supposed to talk about, I mean, we got some really good results out of that one. That's really like the last bullet to use whenever you need to get a response from someone. No subject, so going against the the crowd and actually not using a headline does give some results too.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thanks, Youssef. I appreciate all the value that you've put into this. I think the things that stood out the most to me, again, and it's kind of reiterating what other people have been saying in this space, and it's that making an email that's about them and is relationship based rather than sales based is so important. The value of your follow-ups, you said nearly half of the results you get come through the third and fourth follow-up, which is incredible. And I've heard that many, many times. So it's really good to consistently hear these themes. We talked about data quality and the significance of starting with good ingredients when you're making this recipe for success here. So I think all of these things are recurring themes. And if everybody's saying it, there's a reason. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're saying, hey, I'm not getting results, what am I not doing? You're probably overthinking some particular aspect of it, because these are the fundamentals. These are the basics. And if you can fall back to the basics and say, hey, I'm going to throw out my templates that don't work. I'm going to write a new email today, and I'm just going to test it and see what it does. You'll know what you need to do, because if people come back and they're upset with your email or they don't like it, you're still selling. And you need to break that mold and say, hey, I'm not selling anymore. I'm going to serve people. I'm going to talk about them. I'm going to get them excited to hear about themselves, because that's what humans like to hear. They like to hear about themselves. So if we can do that for people through automation, we're actually serving them and giving them value just by telling them about themselves in a cold email, and being able to bridge that through follow-ups and saying, hey, we're reaching out for a reason. We've got something valuable to you. Then it's a natural, fluid conversation rather than a whole hard, cold pitch coming through an email, which is what we're all seeing in our inboxes every day. And is the reason that many people believe cold email is dead, because everybody's hitting that spam button, trash. And it's really the difference is personalization and being human at scale. So I think everything you've said is spot on.
Yeah, well, I mean, your summary right there was totally spot on. It's really about connecting with people, giving before you can get something, and that works with 2 steps. If I can just summarize on my end as well, the data you can get, key factor of success. Just don't dismiss this. This is super important, because it will just entail how your campaign goes. And right away after, it's the copywriting and the softwares you use to personalize and follow up. These are really the 2 pillars that I would focus on. So yeah, as you said, if you've done things wrong before, start from scratch. You can always make it. Have a trial for yourself. I mean, there's resources that you offer, Matt, as well, that I think are really good. Same, I mean, if you want to try the template or any other, happy to have anyone's comments on that one too.
Awesome. Well, we're going to put a link to the Scale Lab in this podcast description, the podcast notes. So anybody that is looking for help with their campaigns or wants to pass off this burden of a process, if you're not used to it, if you're not having fun doing it, talk to the Scale Lab, talk to Youssef, talk to his team. Because I'd strongly recommend working with an expert. You can only afford to lose so much traction in a business before you need to say, hey, what I'm doing doesn't work, and we need to invest in something that does. So double down on things that work. And if cold email isn't working for you, it's not because it's not a fit for your business. It's simply because you haven't broken the code. And people like Youssef have seen this work in many, many businesses from his VC background into the Scale Lab now. So strongly recommend reaching out there. And if you are working with poor quality data, then of course we're Coldlytics, and you can reach out to us as well. We're happy to help you out. With that, guys, we'll close out the podcast, and thanks for listening.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Take care.